scenes of excessive force that do not belong in a constitutional democracy. These protests by housing activists took place in October this year. They were in response to the City of Cape Town's approval on September the 29th of a new unlawful occupation bylaw and amendments to the Unlawful Occupation and Streets, Public Places and Prevention of Noise Nuisances bylaw of 2007. These laws are known simply as the Streets bylaws. They provide for the following. People found sleeping in a public place without authority are first issued with a compliance notice. They will be offered alternative shelter. If they refuse the offer of alternative shelter, they will be fined and face arrest.
They're trying to scare people into accepting the offers of shelter that they currently have. These offers don't work for at least 71% of the street-based people in Cape Town.
The Streets bylaw also empowers officials to remove dwellings without a court order, to decide if the structure constitutes a home, to decide which informal settlements will receive services, to conduct searches without a warrant, to impound people's belongings and compel property owners to prevent unlawful occupation. The City of Cape Town denies the bylaws criminalise the homeless. It insists the city is humanitarian and committed to assisting the homeless to leave the streets and reintegrate with their families and communities.
Before you are issued with a pre-compliance notice, a compliance notice, a fine, before any of that happens, what needs to happen? You must be offered access to a shelter. You have the choice to accept access into a shelter or in a safe space. Our social development 3-people team have at least 6 engagements with homeless communities, with homeless individuals, long before our uniformed officials come into play here.
It also claims that there are sufficient shelters to accommodate the homeless, as well as comprehensive programs to assist with rehabilitation and reintegration.
Our social development teams do a number of things. They identify vulnerable homeless communities. They engage with these vulnerable individuals. They establish relationships with these individuals, hoping to appeal for them to access a social development support.
But street people and human rights lobbyists say that the homeless can only access these services if they agree to go to a shelter or a safe space, regardless of the conditions there. They also accuse the city of pandering to the more wealthy constituents who associate grime with crime and for whom the city's poor have become an eyesore, causing a depreciation in property values. And they accuse the city of breaking its own laws even during the lockdown. Under the Disaster Management Act, the city was prohibited from enforcing evictions, but this did not prevent it from pushing for a moratorium on evictions to be lifted and from demolishing illegal structures.
The city has been breaking the moratorium on evictions, even during the height of COVID, which was level 5 and level 4.
This footage shows the humiliating assault on Bulelani Kolani, who was dragged naked from the illegal structure he had erected on private land in Khayelitsha during 2020, at the height of the lockdown.
I'm feeling so bad. That's why City of Cape Town, back. I'm coming back my dignity. I want to come back my dignity.
Subsequently, the Human Rights Commission, the Housing Forum and the victim went to the Cape Town High Court. They were granted an interim interdict prohibiting the City of Cape Town from conducting evictions during the state of disaster. The court further prohibited the use of excessive force or the confiscation of personal belongings. But the city has recently appealed the court's findings.
It did indicate, who the DA actually works for, because we then warned that should the regulations be relaxed and should this moratorium be uplifted, we will be faced with a homelessness crisis like we have never seen before.
On the 23rd of August, A month before the amended bylaws were approved, the city's law enforcement officers pounced on a group of Greenpoint street dwellers who had set up what is now known as Tent City alongside the Greenpoint tennis courts. Their tents were dismantled and confiscated, along with ID documents and personal belongings.
For me, it's not nice because it's that thing. What happened that time is start happening now again, but they only take us away by like the closer eyes. You understand? But
We don't have rights like that.
But we don't have rights. But they're gonna do it again.
21 occupants launched an urgent application at the Cape Town High Court, challenging the legality of the eviction and demanding the return of their property. Judgment has been reserved.
The city, in terms of its own internal policy, said that during lockdown, no tents shall be removed. And this is now, obviously, in addition to the arguments we made about the Constitution, about the PI Act, the Prevention of Illegal Eviction Act, and about the lockdown regulations, which were issued in terms of the Disaster Management Act. The main issue of our clients were that they were not able to rebuild their homes.
Yet again, before the amended bylaw was approved, on Sunday the 19th of September, law enforcement converged on a parking lot in District 6, dismantled structures and confiscated the personal belongings of a group of street dwellers without providing a court order authorizing the eviction.
The court ordered that the city's actions were unlawful.
The Cape Town High Court subsequently ruled that the City of Cape Town cannot use bylaws to violate the Constitution's Bill of Rights. The eviction was therefore unlawful, and the city was ordered to return the confiscated belongings to the street dwellers. But the city has appealed against this ruling as well.
So in any judgment that doesn't go their favor, they appeal it. And people must also remember that they're using ratepayers' money to fund all this litigation.
In recent years, homeless people have increased their challenges against fines and evictions. For example, in September 2019, Karen Gelderblom, who had been homeless for 8 years, was fined 500 Rand for littering. Together with 6 other applicants, she succeeded in getting an interim interdict against the city, preventing the city from issuing fines and confiscating street dwellers' property. In March this year, law firm Indifuna Ukwazi applied to both the High Court and the Equality Court to challenge the constitutionality of the city street and waste management bylaws.
We went to court the first time in September and we got that interdict. You know how powerful I felt. It was so important for us to tell our story. I mean, the whole of Cape Town, I walked to every homeless community I walked, and I gave them, and I told them make copies, and if law enforcement come, do this, because people need to know that we are the human beings. I never asked anybody for something.
A self-taught jewellery designer who has sold her wares all over the city, Gelderblom's stock, ID and documents were also confiscated. Her belongings have never been returned, but she's no stranger to insults, assaults and arrests.
Whenever they told me I didn't have rights, whenever they treated me like I was nothing, whenever these young law enforcement Power Rangers would come and they would come with their profanity and their abusive ways, I would feel like, here they're slipping me again. They're making me weaker, you know. But they actually took that fear that they imposed on me, they took it back on their own eyes without realizing. I took back what belonged to me.
And what is that?
My dignity.
The COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown has had a devastating effect on all sectors of society, swelling the ranks of the homeless, even among the middle class.
We need needed to very quickly find additional accommodation for our homeless people. Our option at that time was to open up more safe spaces, which we knew then would remain even long after the pandemic.
But the city is at odds with NGOs about the numbers of homeless in Cape Town.
From the 6,000 that was estimated in 2018-2019, we're probably at about 8,000, 9,000 now. We don't know exact figures, but what we do know is that the mayor has instructed the Social Development Department to reinitiate another study to be able to update the statistic around the number of homeless people.
A recent study that was done by U-Turn and MES, basically they found that there are about 14,000 people living on the street. That enumeration by the NGOs was done in 2020, so we can only speculate that there are actually more numbers.
What is beyond dispute is that without sustainable holistic interventions, street-based communities are increasingly vulnerable to assault, arrest, mental and physical illness, substance abuse and addiction, hopelessness, and the fear that they will never escape the harsh realities of their lives.
The worst part about being homeless is the hell that you go through at night. You need to be what you need, because you don't know when somebody is going to come into their area and come hold a knife against your neck and steal whatever you've got. Law enforcement had this thing of, especially when it rains, when it storms, they would come here at 2 o'clock in the morning and they would cut open your tent, or they would cut your sheeting, and they would pull that cardboard that serves as your mattress, they would pull that out from under you. And, it didn't matter to them because it wasn't them, it wasn't their family, it was you. And then some of them had the audacity to tell you that you were a disgrace for your race and things like that.
But behind every stereotype of a street person is a story of suffering and survival. Stories that go way beyond the political and the economic spheres into a profoundly personal space. Street people inhabit the streets, but most are desperate to get their lives back on track.
It's a very sad situation, but I can say that I sometimes thank God that I am in the space that I am now, because I've learned so much about myself and about the realities of life, that money cannot buy certain things in us.
At first sight, Chaz Rogers doesn't fit the stereotype of the homeless. He has been a professional musician, sound engineer, music producer, model, actor and artist for much of his life. But for the past 2 years, he has been living on the streets. I wanted to find out more about how he landed in this homeless space.
What happened to me was I thought I was doing okay, which I was, and I'd known a very good friend, and I had big plans of setting up a studio on the West Coast. We took what we both had between us to buy a property which we purchased, and the vision was to bring artists into that space, into a studio, offer them the accommodation in the hotel at St. Helena Bay, and do a project that would last for at least 3 months, where they'd enjoy the beauty of Cape Town and the West Coast, and still come out with an album and a video,
It didn't work out, so they returned to Cape Town.
We decided to come back to Cape Town and seek our fortune here, but I guess the timing of coming back was also wrong, so everything just ended up in a mess.
Then COVID struck, decimating the creative economy. Musicians who literally have to sing for their supper suffered most.
We were like locusts, just jumping into things without planning, because we had the money and we thought we would get it right. So that was the biggest lesson in my life, though. Ever since that, I've learned what planning is about.
Rather than face fines or the humiliation of being harassed by law enforcement, he chose to live in one of the city's designated safe spaces, cramped under the Kulumbo Bridge, exposed to the elements with inadequate facilities.
People sleep on pallets, which is the most uncomfortable way to sleep. There's ablution blocks where you could use the toilet, and there are showers. There is no hot water in the showers. You have to actually use a bucket. We've been using buckets for as long as I know. Recently they put little shower heads in so you get the spray, but it's like cold water. There is no hot water for showers. It's very limiting. The living conditions are actually kind of inhumane in a way, if I may say so. This is not a finger-pointing exercise.
Yet he still remains grateful for the crumbs life seems to have thrown his way.
I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is thank God for the breath He's given me. Life is the most precious gift we have, and we all take it for granted. So once I've done that, I look at the weather, I look at my messages, and I try to work out what I should do first. What I see right now in front of me with the people that I have connected with, and I've made a lot of awesome connections with people on the street and in the space where I live. They are beautiful people. You cannot judge anybody for the circumstances that they are in, because you might not know who that person is.
The crisis of homelessness is not unique to Cape Town nor South Africa. Wars, tyranny, and of course COVID-19 have magnified it as a global concern. And in Cape Town, the ANC-led municipality was also struggling to cope with its burgeoning numbers of street dwellers long before the DA won control of the city in 2006.
We've done a good job. Have we done the best job that we can? We will never do the best job that we can, because we can always do better and better, is my personal belief. We are seeing is the increasing politicization and, as I refer to it, use of homeless people as soccer balls between organizations and the city of Cape Town.
In addition to the approximately 27 shelters that are partially funded by the Department of Social Development, the city has opened 3 safe spaces, which brings the city's bed capacity to around 3,000. But these numbers are still woefully inadequate to accommodate even half of the city's disputed homeless population. The city disagrees.
When a city has between 80 and 100 beds in our shelters on a daily basis, and the argument is that our shelters are full, then I can't believe that, because we track those numbers every day, and every day there are beds available for homeless people.
Although street dwellers are directly impacted by local governments, municipalities are not constitutionally mandated to deal with the homeless. It is the mandate of the province's social development and national departments, not the city.
We as a city and as a local government and as a caring city know that we can't wait for other spheres of government to address a need that we're feeling very regularly on the ground.
But how effective is the city's punitive approach to the homeless through its enforcement of its bylaws? And why are some street people refusing the offer of shelter despite the drastic consequences? We will examine this further in a subsequent episode.
If the focus of your intervention is law enforcement and punitive and security, you are not going to make a change in someone's life. Because remember, if you've been on the street for 20 odd years, you're now chronically homeless, you're also mistrustful of law enforcement and state actors.
In fact, research shows that the streets bylaws are rooted in the colonial and apartheid laws dating back to the Prevention of Illegal Squatting Act of 1951. In 1996, the Constitution and new legislation like the Prevention of Illegal Eviction Act recognized that dispossession had left many with no choice but to occupy land illegally for survival, and that although it is unlawful, illegal occupation is not criminal, and only a court can issue an eviction order after considering all the circumstances.
Our criminal justice system is already overburdened. Our prisons are full. This will now just add and contribute to the costs.
It is conservatively estimated that over 50% of street-based communities are now chronically homeless. Homeless musician Chaz Rogers has become part of this community, and he took us to meet some of the dwellers of Tent City in the manicured suburb of Greenpoint. Some of them have been homeless for over 20 years, like Valencia Lewis and Aubrey Engelbrecht, and they told us about promises made before the recent local elections.
Hello, and then new like Mayor Marcus, and they took all our names inside. We were 22 people, our names in some of them they had the ID numbers. They took it, promising us, telling us yes, the next day they're gonna come and make our IDs. And I must say, at the same time, no, this is just a lie because it's like been like this for years.
Others, like Theo Redlinghuis, have been homeless for 2 years, living in his car with his life partner.
I relocated here to start a small business. I had my own little business that I was doing, home improvements. I lost my work. I was a driver for 35 years and I got cancer. I came down here to look for a better life, but unfortunately the COVID happened and everything happened, so I'm stuck here. Unfortunately my car also broke down, so I'm in a circumstance here that I'm only living on an old age pension, so there's nothing much I can actually do. I've still got dignity, but after a while you don't know what to do, and it's hopelessness. That's the biggest part of life, is your hopelessness.
I see people who have nothing, who have been discarded by society. I see the beauty in them, which society doesn't see.
But there are also personal choices to be made and lessons to be learnt.
It's taught me about being more responsible. It's taught me that I am not invincible. Sometimes you have to lose it all to get it all back.
Looking in at the situation from the outside and looking at these pictures that are being shared on social media, it is devastating.